Hi guys, Ranan here, and today we're going to talk about Ranan, the brand new Crystal Warrior, and also a Lightning Mage. Now, in a nutshell, this guy is going to hit less hard than Ibarra. From what I'm seeing, he doesn't have enough ways to overcome mitigation, but he has a really good amount of survivability. He's got some heals and good supportive sides, so he's a more supportive version without all the nukes. If I had to think about his damage, looking at his stats, I would expect him to hit a little bit similarly to Halloween Little Leela, where one hit is still massive, it's going to reduce the enemy very low, but he's not going to walk around and one-punch people all the time unless they have high faith and or are weak to magical attacks. But today we'll be taking a look at his kit, what he has, where he might shine, whether he's a good investment or not, and then his place in the meta currently in JP. So, to begin, this guy, as a Crystal Warrior, is a cost 100 unit. He will be half rate, so he'll be on a banner where he can be pretty expensive. I think if you don't have 40,000 Viz that you're willing to spend on this guy just to pull him, so let's say 55,000 Viz if you want to max him in time to actually make use of him while he's relevant, don't go for him. And you know, looking at the timeline, there is going to be Luck and Celis basically right after him in his Vision card, and then the Persona collaboration that has really good units, but it's also very loved by the community. Who doesn't love Persona games? And then other Crystal Warriors coming up that are also very good. Is this guy a must pull? No, he's not. I don't think anybody was going to regret a couple months from now having pulled him. He, at least from what I see on the JP side, he's not a meta-defining unit that's going to change everything like Starlet Elena. But there we go. As I said, he is much more durable than a lot of the other mages. He's going to have very high amounts of spirit and can have a very high amount of defense as well. He has a barrier that mitigates every type of damage, so it's going to cover him both physical and magical. He does have some ways to enable offense, but mostly offense in the way that he's going to decrease magic resistance, break barriers, and reduce counter chance. So he doesn't decrease spirit or defense or something that's very widespread. He does cover a couple things though. He has the ability to remove courage as well, which is pretty important because when I'm looking at the future timeline and a bunch of the very popular units, they basically all have courage. So that is going to remain relevant for a long time, I think. It's also not many units that have this ability, so it's something that's pretty rare. He has the ability to Dispel, Protect, and Shell, but only in one of his sub-jobs, so it's very limited. And then he can heal in one of his sub-jobs as well, so he can be a decent support in that regards. So definitely many different ways you can build this guy. Now, this guy's TMR is pretty interesting. It's only equipable by mages, so you have a fairly intense limitation right there, but it increases HP, defense, and spirit. Okay, I would love to see some agility in there, but not all TMRs can have it. The ability is pretty good. It's a one-time cast, it increases your magic, and then hastes the unit using it for 3 turns, which is pretty badass. And you're a mage, so even if you're hasted, you'll likely not run out of AP over the course of those 3 turns. If you've never actually calculated it, haste increases your units, basically the rhythm at which they take their turns, by 42% over 3 turns, leading to a 126% increase in turns over these 3 turns. So you will lap your enemies once thanks to haste, and then another 1/5 of a turn, which can be pretty impactful. It can indeed lead to you hitting an enemy twice before they go, and it is one of the strongest buffs in the game in my opinion. Then, if we're looking at his stats, I would say this guy's pretty average for a cost 100 mage. He's got 3400 HP, which is less than Ibarra, but similar to the Black Witch. He's got similar magic to the Black Witch as well, similar agility. We're basically looking at the same unit if we're just looking at the stats. Their resistances are slightly different. He's got a pretty good slash resistance, weak to pierce, weak to strike, and then resistant to missile and to magic. If somebody's weak to pierce and strike, for me, that's very good, because they're not as common as the other damage types, and the strongest pierce unit in the game is Oberon, who is earth type, and then, you know, he's already going to lose that matchup. It's not going to matter that much for Ranan. Status effect resistances to stuff is really good. It's one of those status effects that completely screw you over. Stun and poison, I don't think that's going to come in handy too often. You might be looking at that 522 magic and think, he's going to hit harder than Ibarra. No, and that's because of the mods and the offensive abilities they have. Ranan's TP skills, when he goes into a fight, mainly revolve around increasing his own survivability, and same for his passives, whereas Ibarra has a ton of buffs, where she just increases her ability to kill people, and kill people even more, and that's where the difference is. The 20 magic in their base stats will not make it so that Ranan hits harder overall. Now, let's talk about his passives. First of all, one of his unique passives gives him Spirit and Spirit Penetration. I think as a magic attacker, primarily, you need this on, because if you're hitting an enemy that's designed to tank mages, they typically have 60, 70 spirit, and if you don't have any spirit penetration, your damage is essentially negated completely. So this one is a must, and then depending on what you're fighting, you could decide to go for some extra magic for a bit more damage, or some reduced cast times if you really need it, but I think in most scenarios, you're going to want the Tutor passive that gives you 15 spirit and defense, while decreasing your magic attack. Now, you might be thinking, this is an attacker, why would I decrease his magic attack? Well, the fact is, this guy hits hard enough that he's going to knock enemies, within 25% of their HP, more often than not, unless he's targeting the tank. And so a second hit is still enough to kill them, even if you have slightly less damage from that mod. Yes, 20 less is a lot, but over the course of 2 or 3 hits, you're still going to kill enemies. Chances are it won't make a big difference in his ability to kill. So I would prefer the extra survivability to make sure my attacker doesn't get killed by an AoE that catches them by surprise. Then in terms of counter abilities, he's got one that heals himself. Sure, counter heal. We know that's always pretty good. And then he can also reduce damage taken by 30%. Honestly, I'm not sure which one I would take. I think it would depend on the fight. If you're fighting enemies that have the ability to decrease healing power, you definitely want the barrier, which is always pretty relevant. And then the thing about counter heals is you have to survive the incoming hit for it to proc, whereas a barrier always has a chance to proc because it just decreases incoming damage. So if you're expecting the enemies to be able to one-punch you, maybe because they have barrier breaks, you probably just want the damage mitigation. Whereas if you think you're going to have a chance to take 2-3 hits before going down, because these enemies are going to hit with weaker attacks several times, such as for PvE for example, then I would use a counter heal, because it's just going to put you back to full life whenever it procs, and then you can not bother about healing this guy. Now on to the main part, his unique kit. His kit mainly revolves around dealing damage. Most of his abilities have a cast time, they're really mage type abilities, and they are almost all reflectable. Normally I would say Ranan would be good, right, because there's a bit of a water meta incoming, and one of them is a water tank, but most of Ranan's abilities will be absorbed. His limit break will still go through, but unlike Ibarra, who has slash attacks that are not reflectable, this guy, once he drops the LB, everything else he has can be reflected, so he'll have a bit of trouble dealing with her. His first ability, though, it's pretty cool. It decreases magic resistance and then deals damage. I love when a unit's basic ability does that. First of all, basic abilities typically have a 121 mod, not 141, so he already has a pretty good mod. I think that's because it has a cast time, but then it decreases magic resistance before dealing damage, so it's going to hit pretty hard still as a single target ability that only costs 16 AP. Then he's got a pretty good buff that increases missile resistance and spirit for his allies. Why not? That's pretty solid overall. The EX upgrade just increases the AoE around him, so he covers a wider area. Missile resist, always good. Spirit, always pretty good. It's pretty much the anti-Jaden buff, which, seeing how prevalent Jaden is, it is a really good buff to have. Then he's got his Oberon barrier. Basically, it has a cast time. When it resolves, you have a 3-hit, 50% barrier against any type of damage. So we know how good it is for Oberon. It's going to be just as good for Ranan. After that, you have an ability that is single target, breaks barrier, reduces counter chance, and deals damage in a 200 mod. I don't like that ability so much. I know he's going to use it because the barrier break, if you're hitting somebody with a 50% barrier, this will clearly be his highest damage option. And in that scenario, it's great. Against some tanks, it's going to be great. But I think in today's meta, the large diamond AoE attacks are the most important because they often catch the enemy's damage dealer as well as the tank. And we are in a world where tanks are just so tanky that they will take 3 to 4 hits before going down. And if you're wasting your turn hitting them with a single target, while the enemy team's catching you in an AoE, the enemy team will win. So AoE attacks are the most critical ones to check. Fortunately, Ranan's AoE attack is not bad. It does have a cast time, not that great, but it has a 220 mod, which is very high, and a chance to confuse. There's a lot of enemies with high faith right now, so you could potentially end up just destroying an enemy mage. So there are a couple pretty good applications for this. And then finally, he's got an ability that is, this time, an instant cast. His 120 ability dispels guts before dealing damage, and then, you know, can potentially do pretty significant damage. It's not as large of an AoE, but the fact it's an instant cast, just like the single target ability that breaks barrier, makes it relevant in some scenarios. So overall, pretty well-rounded kit in terms of damage. He doesn't imperil lightning, but he would be a great partner for somebody like Ibarra, where he imperils the magic resistance, and then she imperils lightning resistance, and nobody should be able to survive that for long. Now, I quickly mentioned Ranan's Limit Break being an attack. What it does is it increases his Spirit's penetration by another 40 for 3 turns, and deals pretty high damage. So it's a great option. What I like about this is if you're fighting a Spirit tank, you're going to be ignoring 80% of their Spirit for 3 turns if you have the right passive equipped, and then if you have, you know, silver-rimmed sunglasses, you can actually ignore 100% and just blast them through their Spirit. So this is really good as a tank buster move. It's going to have a high mod. Is it going to be enough to kill Silas in a single hit? I don't think so, but maybe if you have both Ranan and Ibarra, again, they can just limit break together and wipe the enemy team very quickly. The Crystal Warrior's sub-job has a very interesting move where he can dispel, protect, and shell, and then deal damage. It's one of the very rare ways to dispel, protect, and shell. If you're not aware, protect and shell are considered statuses in the game and not buffs. So anything that removes buffs does not affect them. It needs to be something specific that dispels, protect, and shell. And I think he's the first unit that has this currently. There are some other in JP, but you know, that's months from now. So it is going to be something very unique and very rare. Then he also has a TP skill that has a chance to inflict silence and slow for the targets. That could be interesting, but I don't think it'll see much play. Typically, mages don't run out of AP, and this is more of an off-turn ability you'll use to generate some AP in between attacks. So I don't think it's going to be too relevant. Then if we're looking at his other jobs, he's got the Korodama sub-job, which has the great option of increasing his movement. So his move and jump by 1, that's really good. And if you're using Ranan as a pure attacker, you don't care about the healing side, I think this is the sub-job you want to use, because the extra mobility is good, sure, but also it gives him access to unevadable pain, which is a guaranteed hit. It's not a very hard-hitting guaranteed hit, though. It has a mod of 141. If you remember, this guy has Diamond Shape Pattern at 220 mod, so he has other means that deal a lot more damage. Building him for accuracy will still result in higher damage if you're fighting evasion units, but at least it gives him one thing he can use if his enemies are very evady. The other moves are also pretty good, some other AoE options, but that's really the main reason to go for this sub-job. Then the Tutor sub-job is also pretty interesting. You have a lightning support buff that's going to give lightning attack and debuff resistance while increasing Ranan's casting speed, so that's good. You have access to a heal, you have access to a single target AoE and slash resistance buff that I don't think you're going to use. I think you'll prefer the AoE spirit and missile resistance buff over that. But most importantly, you have a heal that increases agility, attack, and magic, and then heals for quite a bit. So it's kind of a choice. Do you want single target heals that are very good and buff? Or do you want him to have a guaranteed hit and be more focused on attacking? And I guess it'll depend on your team combination or what type of content you're challenging with him. Now, we've looked at all that, but what does it look like in a sample build? Now, in this case, I only have Ranan's stuff equipped. There is no teammate involved in the stats that you see on screen, and nobody else with a vision card. But with just himself, no rune, no secondary vision card, he reaches roughly 6,000 HP, 1130 magic, so you can imagine if we have a Ramu vision card, that's 1300, so it's a little bit more. He does have pretty good mods, 40 lightning attack, 30 magic attack, and that is with the passive that decreases his magic attack by 20, so he would have 50. So it is quite possible to give him good offensive stats. What I think is even more interesting though is that he has with this pretty good agility, over 90, and then he also has 19 defense and 52 spirit, so he is pretty bulky through all of that. He doesn't have great resistances or great HP, but if you're running the Aigaon vision card perhaps for more HP, or you just have lightning teammates that increase his HP as well, then he can be relatively tanky while hitting pretty damn hard. Then vision cards for him, there's a lot of options for magic attackers in the lightning element. I would say either you use the ones that release alongside him, which is Europa, gives you agility and magic attack, or you use Wish Upon a Demon that gives you magic attack as well, but AoE resistance instead of agility. They're both very good depending on what exactly you need. Then Ramu for some extra magic for everybody is going to be really good. You could go for Maneater on magical attack with Blossoms in the Dark, or equip anything else. If you're pairing him with Cloud, you'll probably want the Scorpion Sentinel or some other type of VC. And then there are really good lightning units to pair alongside him. If you want him to be accurate, you could go 9S for some extra accuracy, or just run somebody like Cloud who will cover the evasion units for you. Charlotte is a fantastic tank, and Ranan can be a pretty decent healer if he's in the back, so he can make sure she stays healthy. And then you could just run your 2 mages alongside alongside Charlotte, and have Ibarra Ranan just blasting the enemy team to bits from the back line. So lightning is pretty strong as an element and has a lot of options to pair with this guy. Overall though, is he that future-proof? My question is, will he be able to land hits on the light team? Very shortly after his release, it's going to be Lux release, who is going to be even more evady than Starlit Elena. Then there's also going to be Violet, for those that don't have Starlit Elena, that's going to be very evady. And all of these units are very focused on evasion. We are going to get a secondary vision card system, we are going to get a rune system, and everybody's stats will go way higher. Typically, when we get a massive stat upgrades, units that rely on a specific stat very heavily, such as evasion units that rely on luck very heavily, will just go all in for that. And then units that are more well-rounded, like Ranan, that needs some defensive capabilities, some offensive capabilities, and some accuracy, they will not be able to follow the raw increase in evasion. I feel like when we get those runes and those secondary VCs, units that rely on evasion will just go all in. They will get even more evady than they currently are, and unless we focus on accuracy at the same level with these runes and these secondary VCs, most attackers won't be able to follow. And so if they don't have guaranteed hits or init accuracy, they're just not going to work against these units. That's not to say this guy can't deal with evasion. He does have a guaranteed hit in one of his abilities, but overall I don't think it will ever be a strong matchup for him, because if you're expecting him to be accurate enough to hit these guys, you're sacrificing a lot of extra stats. Still, that's just one theme. I expect the light meta to be very prevalent in the high-level guild battles and a lot of the competitive scene, but that's not all there is to our divisions. And there will also be a bit of a water meta. There will be some other lightning units coming out where he's sure to have a chance to shine. You could play him alongside the handout queen. We're going to have Resnick, who's going to be a great support and healer, so he could focus entirely on damage and do his job very well. There's going to be some room to play if you use him. But will he be your new guild battle unit that never leaves your roster? I don't think so. I have a feeling that Light is going to stay at the top of the meta for a while, and he will not be able to breach that. So with that said, is he worth the investment? First, his timing is very difficult. Just like Setya before him, there is a lot of really good stuff coming, and while he himself is a good unit, he is not a fantastic meta-defining unit, while there are some fantastic meta-defining units in the near future. So that's something to keep in mind. Lightning is already very stacked. If you have Ibarra, Cloud, Charlotte, I don't think Ranan is going to change your game that much. You already have very good options to run, and yes, you could do Ranan, Ibarra, Charlotte potentially as a great combo, but there's also other units that will come. I don't think he's needed, but he is definitely good. I've been talking about him for a while. He has a lot of really good tools in his kit. He will be able to fight and win a lot of fights for you. So I feel like he's a little bit like the Lightning Gulbas that got released a short while ago. Not everybody went for him, but those that did ended up with a fantastic mage that is a good partner for teams with like Black Rose Helena and Gulbas and Dwayne, and then they have a lot of damage. If he gets hit, he doesn't go down too quickly because he is pretty bulky. Ranan is pretty similar. He's basically Lightning Gulbas in my opinion, which makes him a good pick, but a niche one and one you don't have to make unless you really want him. So I'm personally not going to go for him. I did go for Sitya very recently. I'm very happy I built her because she's not as well liked by the community, I would guess, and I love playing units that are a bit of an underdog, but I don't have the viz to go for him if I also want to get Celeste, who's very shortly, so my decision is to skip. Hopefully this helps you with your own decision making. Let me know your thoughts though. I'd be curious to know if there are players that really want him, and if they have plans on team comps where they want to use him in. So let me know. Otherwise, thank you so much for watching, guys, and I will be back soon.